No team in Italian football epitomizes the phrase the streets won't forget quite like Udinese in the early 2010s. They had an insane lineup of players that brought them to epic new heights, with the uncanny strike partnership of a then 22-year-old Chilean from a small mining town and their 33-year-old Neapolitan captain Antonio Di Natale leading the line. That alone is some pairing. But the rest of their team was a beautiful mess of international talent, with the likes of Andanovic, Benatia, Quadrado, Inler, Christian Zapata, Asamoah, Mauricio Isla. We'll get on to even more later. They represented the city of Udine, tucked away in Italy's northeast, only 35 miles from the border with Slovenia. With that degree of alchemy going on, how could this side not be special? It is an epic underdog story, and includes the rise of a South American icon alongside other top players who you may have forgotten joined forces in Udine.
Non si capisce niente perché c'è 7000 lingue. Argentina, napoletano, tucchi.
Però perché non ho capito, praticamente io so meglio.
Ognuno capisce cazzo di suoi.
Ho visto che dici.
Scendi, dice la formazione e poi ci voglio ci rimane noi se ne accorge ogni tanto, ci siamo 3-0, 4-0, se ne accorge niente.
You see, the club has a rich history of scouting players and building teams that have been competitive for European spots. In fact, Udinese even qualified for the Champions League once in the mid-2000s, but the 2009-10 season was ugly for them. They sold off star striker Fabio Quagliarella in the summer of 2009 and changed managers twice over the course of the ensuing season, ending the year in 15th place. They survived relegation as a one-man team behind the 29 goals of league top scorer Antonio Di Natale, who was rightfully named Italian Player of the Year. Just to give you some context of how underrated this season was, Lionel Messi won the Golden Boot that year with 34 goals. Following right behind him were Di Natale and Didier Drogba, tied for second place with 29 apiece. Needless to say, it was a legendary year for one of Serie A's all-time greats. Then Udinese clearly needed reinforcements on the field, but started with sorting out their new head coach. Parma's Francesco Guidolin, who managed Udinese for a brief spell in the late 1990s, returned to the Bianconeri for the 2010-11 season. The summer transfer window brought promise as Mehdi Benatia joined from Clermont on a free, and Pablo Armero came from Palmeiras for cheap to shore up a defense that had been third worst in the league the season before. Germán Denis brought a veteran rotation presence up front, intended to fill the Quagliarella-shaped hole in the lineup, while Almen Abdi brought some quality depth to the midfield. Holding on to Di Natale was the biggest challenge the club would face in the summer of 2010, as Juventus were reportedly close to agreeing to a transfer fee for the club captain. Facing the risk of losing their star player, Udinese fans came out in force. Their passion at the preseason celebration shown here was impossible to deny, and Di Natale made clear shortly thereafter that he was staying on board. But the speculation surrounding the Neapolitan's future had weighed on the club. This tension had evidently carried over to the pitch, as Udinese lost their opening 4 games of the 2010-11 season, conceding 9 goals while only scoring 2. Sure, Inter and Juve back-to-back is brutal to open the season, but the team really wasn't clicking. Players who had been long-term investments weren't paying off, and it looked like Udinese might be in another relegation scrap, sitting dead last in the table through 4 weeks. A draw against Sampdoria did very little to lift spirits, but a win against newly promoted Cesena thanks to an injury-time goal from Mehdi Benatia certainly did. Another late goal against newcomers Brescia helped them to a second consecutive victory, finally lifting them out of last place and generating a bit of momentum. Their mettle would truly be tested as they hosted a strong Palermo team on matchday 8, who deserve an entire video of their own. Thankfully, an early goal from Benatia and a penalty from Di Natale saw the Friulani to a 2-1 win. Alexis Sánchez, who had been in and out of the team to start the season, put on a masterclass the following week in Bari, netting his first goal with this piss missile and providing an assist for his compatriot Mauricio Isla in a win which saw Udinese climb to 8th. Inconsistency defined the next month for the men from Udine, as November brought them 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw, with a home victory over Lecce balanced out by defeat against Roma and Catania. They rounded out November with a statement 3-1 win over Napoli, where Di Natale got a hat-trick against his boyhood club with 3 quality goals, including this stunner. Leading into the winter break, Guidolin suffered a loss away at his former club, but a win over Fiorentina thanks to this wonder strike from Armero. In their final game of 2010, Udinese traveled to the capital to take on third-place Lazio in a shootout. Hernández opened the scoring in the second minute, with Alexis Sánchez heading home with the Natale cross early in the second half. Minutes later, Lazio restored their lead from a corner, only for Muslera to be wrong-footed by Udini's header, bringing the match to 2-2. A Libor Kozak header deflected off vice-captain Zapata, ending Udinese's year in bitter disappointment, with a harsh 3-2 loss leaving them ninth at Christmas. They opened 2011 with a tidy win over Chievo at home, but were on the road in matchday 18 to face the Ibrahimovic-led Milan at the San Siro. In what turned out to be an 8-goal thriller, Guidolin's men went toe-to-toe with the eventual champions of Italy. A poacher's finish from Di Natale gave them the lead in the first half, though Milan responded through Alex Pato. A diving header from Sanchez and a stroke of class from Di Natale brought the score to 3-1 inside 63 minutes. The lead wasn't to last though. A wicked deflection off Benatia and yet another from Pato brought the score level on 82 minutes. Dennis pounced on a cross from Isla to surely put the game away in the 89th, but in the 90th, Ibrahimovic put his 10th of the season home as the two sides split the points. The draw didn't matter though, because at this point, the Friulani were flying high with their confidence evident in their style of play. They followed a 4-2 win at Genoa with a commanding 3-1 victory at home against the defending treble champions Inter, despite conceding first. A rocket from Zapata, a free kick from Di Natale, and a clever finish from Domizzi showed this team's resilience and quality, which they would need to carry with them to Torino as they faced off against Juventus. Claudio Marchisio briefly morphed into R9, and suddenly, Udinese were on the back foot. But, once again, they showed their resolve as Zapata snuck a shot past Buffon, while the Chilean connection between Isla and Sanchez struck again as Lezebrite ran out with all 3 points to bring them up to 6th place. This great form continued, hitting a minor bump in the road with a 0-0 draw at home against relegation battling Brescia, perhaps stalling their momentum before an important road game in Palermo. The trip all the way down to Sicily proved to be a tour de force, with 4 goals from Sanchez, including one where he literally sat the keeper down before slotting it home. Can't forget the obligatory hat-trick for Di Natale, which meant a 7-0 win and 3 points in the bank for Guidolin's men. In a performance so dominant, they even received a standing ovation from the Rosaneri supporters. This epic showing from Sanchez meant everything, as Udinese fans were running out of patience for him coming into the season. You see, they had bought him in 2006 straight from Chile, where he was nicknamed El Niño Maravilla, or the Wonder Child, placing some lofty expectations on his shoulders. Udinese immediately loaned him to Colo-Colo and River Plate in back-to-back seasons for him to gain some first-team experience. He performed admirably on loan, becoming well-established in South American football, but was yet to prove himself across his first 2 seasons in Europe. Finally, his showing against Palermo did, taking him to 11 goals on the season and generating some serious hype around the 22-year-old Chilean. The entire team was thriving at this point in the season, as Guidolin had finally found his ideal formation and starting lineup after struggling for consistency in the beginning of the season. With a much improved Andanovic in net and a back 3 of Mauricio Domizzi, Mede Benatia and Cristian Zapata in front of him, bringing Udinese from 3rd worst to 5th best defense in the league. A midfield 5 composed of the tireless Quadro Asamoah, the powerhouse Gohan Inler, and veteran Giampiero Pinzi, complemented by the dynamic Mauricio Isla and the rapid Pablo Armeiro out wide. Up top, captain Toto Di Natale paired with the youthful Alexis Sánchez to form perhaps the most formidable lineup Udinese has ever seen. That's not even to mention the talent on the bench in this team. Dennis, Abdi, and Cuadrado were available to come on at any time and were decisive deep in the season. Following the drubbing of Palermo came 3 more wins and 3 more clean sheets. This remarkable run took them to 4th place and firmly in the race for Champions League contention. But it wasn't to last, as the Udinese hype train came to a screeching halt following back-to-back losses in April, the first time Guidolin's men had experienced defeat in almost 5 months. The first was 2-0 away at 18th place Lecce, and the second came thanks to a brace from Francesco Totti in a 2-1 loss at home. Piling on the pain was the absence of Alexis Sánchez, who had missed the Roma game through injury and would be set to spend even more time on the sideline after aggravating the knock in training. Suddenly, Udinese had dropped out of the Champions League spots in 5th place and had to travel down south to play against the Napoli side sitting in 2nd place, spearheaded by the fearsome trident of Cavani, Lavezzi, and Hamsik. Napoli had the lion's share of chances in the first half, and it became clear that the Northerners would need something special to break down this Partenopei side in the absence of Sánchez. Up stepped Gökhan Inler with an outrageous shot from distance that soared past De Sanctis and into the Neapolitan net. Dennis doubled the lead against his former team with a stunning volley off a counterattack just 6 minutes later. But you just couldn't count Napoli out, especially as they won a penalty late in the game, with Edinson Cavani set to have the deficit. A certain Samir Handanovic had other ideas, keeping the 2-goal cushion alive. Napoli did get their consolation goal well into added time, but it wasn't enough as Udinese left the San Paolo with all 3 points, keeping them in the race for Champions League if they could simply stay afloat. But 34 weeks in, the long season was taking a toll on the team's stars, forcing Guidolin to put out heavily rotated lineups in the following matches against Parma and Fiorentina, which they lost 2-0 and 5-2 respectively. They would need a change in fortune if they were to avenge their 3-2 loss against 4th place Lazio when they came to town in matchday 36. Who else would show up for his team in this moment besides Di Natale? Totò grabbed a brace thanks in large part to some incredible play from his strike partner Sánchez, and the Friulani were up 2-0 at half. Handanovic saved the Zarate penalty, but couldn't keep Lazio from grabbing a goal in the second half. Udinese defended incredibly well though, with the Slovenian shotstopper putting in the shift of his life to see out a 2-1 win and taste some sweet, sweet revenge as they leapfrogged Lazio in 4th. Udinese traveled to nearby Verona in desperate need of a win without Sánchez in the lineup. They managed comfortably thanks to goals from his compatriot Isla and the Ghanaian Samoa. This set them up nicely for the final game of the season at home, with the only thing standing between them and Champions League qualification being Milan, who had already clinched the Scudetto weeks in advance. Making top 4 seemed like such a long shot that Guidolin promised he would dance like Kevin Prince Boateng if they qualified, setting the stage for a nervy final game of the season. All they needed was a draw, but against this Milan team, you always had to be prepared for the worst. Luckily, the Rossoneri put out a very rotated side, but Udinese didn't let their guard down. What made this side so lovable was that they played to win, and when the team needed it, anybody would step up. They did not sit back and defend, but instead sought a goal to seal their place in the Champions League. Despite their very best efforts and some missed sitters, including a penalty, the game ended 0-0, leaving Udinese in 4th place, set for the Champions League playoff round. Jubilation in Udine. And for better or for worse, Guidolin kept his promise. That's right, if I had to sit through this, so do you. Antonio Di Natale ended the season as capocannoniere once again with 28 goals and 6 assists in the league. Alexis Sánchez was the breakout star with 12 goals and 10 assists in 31 matches, finally realizing the potential that earned him his nickname in his home country. Udinese Calcio finished with the highest points tally in their history, landing in 4th place behind Milan, Inter and Napoli, just edging Lazio on goal difference. The vibes were incredible. But given the nature of Udinese as a selling club, many of the key players already had one foot out the door when the final whistle was blown against Milan. The spine of their team was ripped out, with Inler headed for Napoli and Zapata gone to Villarreal after 6 years with the club. Even important depth pieces like Juan Cuadrado and Dennis went out on loan, but most crucially, Alexis Sánchez was given the opportunity of a lifetime to play for the recently crowned kings of Europe. He joined forces with Pep Guardiola and Messi at an eye-watering price for the Friulani, who would have a hard time finding his replacement. It also didn't help spirits that they were drawn against the Van Persie-led Arsenal in the Champions League qualifiers, without many of the players who formed that powerful unit in the 2010-11 season. Of course, offers came in for the red-hot Di Natale, but of course, he stayed to anchor Guidolin's team through another season of Serie A action. Other important pieces such as Handanovic, Benatia, Armero, Isla, Asamoah, Pinzi and Domizzi stayed on board. They began their Champions League campaign away at the Emirates, where an early Theo Walcott goal sent them back to Udine 1-0 down on aggregate. In the return leg, Di Natale sent a looping header into the English net at the end of the first half, leveling the tie on aggregate. After the break, Van Persie slotted one past Handanovic, shifting the tie back in Arsenal's favor. This advantage only lasted a few minutes though, after a clumsy Vermaelen handball gifted Udinese a penalty, which Di Natale missed. 10 minutes went by with Udinese desperate for a goal, until Walcott scored off an incisive Arsenal counterattack, crushing Udinese's Champions League dream.
A questo punto io devo dire che il nostro sogno si ferma qui, ma noi abbiamo cercato di inseguirlo con tutte le forze che avevamo.
It was unclear if they would ever reach these heights again, and the disappointment amongst the team was palpable. Perhaps the special season that had earned them this opportunity was a total fluke. There were no big money additions to the squad for the 2011-12 season, but again, shrewd business saw some interesting prospects arriving for cheap to the northeast of Italy. That heart-wrenching loss against Arsenal seemed to light a fire under Udinese, who went unbeaten until late October, even sitting atop the league table in matchday 8. They didn't drop out of the top 5 the entire season, with another ridiculous showing from the now 34-year-old Di Natale, who bagged 23 goals. For context, the closest teammate to him in output was Antonio Floro Flores, who had 4. They even had a fair run at the Europa League, falling to AZ Alkmaar in the round of 16. But it was their defensive output that massively stepped up this season, conceding 8 fewer goals while once again finishing with the 3rd most clean sheets. Not to mention that only Gigi Buffon had a higher save percentage than Samir Handanovic. All of those players who had stayed on board performed admirably, but again, it was their investments from the past that came to fruition this season. Serbian right wing-back Dusan Basta played a key role after missing the entire 2010-11 season through injury. Almen Abdi played a bigger part, with some of their summer transfer moves paying huge dividends as well. The purchase of forward Gabriel Toria from Dinamo Bucharest was especially helpful at the start of the season, while the transfer of Danilo from Palmeiras proved to be a rock at the back for an Udinese side that finished higher than they had the previous season in 3rd, sending them to the Champions League for a 2nd consecutive season. Guidolin had done it again. The core of the squad was even further depleted in the summer of 2012, with the pair of Asamoah and Isla headed for the other Bianconeri, along with Handanovic leaving for Inter. It would be a real test of their resilience to see if Udinese could respond as they had in 2011-12. This time around, they had a much more favorable draw against Braga in the Champions League qualifiers. Tying both legs 1-1 meant penalties at the Stadio Friuli. Unfortunately, it was the recently arrived Michael Suo who missed the decisive penalty for Lesebrette, and post-match, based purely off of Guidolin's attitude, it seemed that this fairy tale was nearing its end.
Mi dispiace tantissimo per me, perché questa per me era l'ultimissima occasione. Mi dispiace per la città, per i tifosi. Si vede che la Champions League è stregata, che per me non sono in grado di arrivare più in là. Non ho altro da aggiungere io.
The team started 2012-13 awfully, but when it was all said and done, finished in 5th. Di Natale did his part with 23 league goals. New recruits Luis Muriel and Roberto Pereira looked promising, but 2012-13 just didn't have the same magic that those previous seasons had. The decline has steadily continued ever since, but I can't help but feel that the 2010-11 Udinese team was special in a way that few others are. So many under-the-radar players reaching their primes on a team that hasn't historically won anything made for great viewing and even better memories to look back on. It's a really interesting period of footballing history in many ways. Antonio Di Natale actually aged like fine wine, becoming the only player since Gabriel Battistuta to score 20+ goals in 4 straight seasons of Italian football, all in his 30s. From 2009 to 2011, only Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi scored more league goals than Di Natale. How's that for a stat?
Quando arriva la palla in aria, abbracciato e gioca perché 1-0.
Meanwhile, we saw the beginning of Alexis Sanchez's road to becoming one of South America's biggest names of the 2010s, eventually winning Chile its first silverware. On a tactical level, this team was very important as well, successfully pioneering a 3-5-2 in Serie A, which would be the basis of the formation that Juventus used to dominate the 2010s. We can only hope to see more stories like this in the future. Modern football could surely use it. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you enjoy this style of video. I haven't done one in a while, but yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.